All right, good morning everybody. Welcome to Modern Production Workflows brought to you by Squarebox Systems and Spectra Logic. Today we have Dave Clack, CEO of Squarebox Systems, and Hossein Ziashakari, Senior VP of Business Development and Alliances at Spectra Logic with us. Whether you're a valued customer, sales partner, or simply interested in learning more about modern production workflows, we hope that you find this webinar resourceful. So a few quick housekeeping items before we kick this off. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the chat box or the question box on the panel, and we'll answer those toward the end of the webinar. We'll also be recording the webinar for playback, and we'll send out a link to that video afterward. Without any further ado, Dave, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody that's joined us for taking time out of your days to spend time with us. So I'm going to spend a little bit talking about what makes a production workflow and why we think with CatDV and with Spectra Logic's BlackPearl we have a combination of products that are really useful and well suited to modern production workflows. I'll give a bit of an overview about CatDV and what it is for those folks who haven't come across it before. And then we're going to try and do a kind of live demo on one of our lab machines to show you how the integration is completely seamless and just works and hides a whole pile of complexity. I'll then hand over to Hossein, who can give an overview of BlackPearl and why it has a unique place in the market and is a pretty cool product, before taking some Q&A between us at the end. So step one. This webinar is all about modern production workflows, and so what's kind of nice about CatDV and BlackPearl working together is that we don't have to talk about features and specific capabilities in real technical terms. We can talk about how we solve business problems between our two products. And so modern production workflows, hopefully these points will resonate with anybody on the call who has anything much to do with building creative content. So modern workflows, there is an ever-increasing amount of inbound content from an ever-increasing amount of cameras and GoPros and all sorts of content creation devices. And so being able to handle and organize and manage that huge volume of inbound content, whether it be 4K, HD, high frame rate, or whatever kind of content, then being able to manage these huge volumes of content is pretty crucial. Then at the same time, making valuable content is not a one-person game, so teams have to work together, and not just internally between producers, editors, directors, DPs, whatever, but people have stakeholders outside of the direct creative team, and so being able to share content during the creation process with the sponsors for projects or customers for projects, and then being able to reuse and find that content later so that you don't have to continually remake new content and you can start to reuse, save time, save money with that. Then that kind of collaboration between people both inside the creative teams and outside is really very important. Automation, given this huge volume of content, then becomes really, really vital. So being able to ingest content, being able to name it and store it in a sensible way so that it will fit with some kind of logical and sensible structure, being able to deliver that content to folks in particular output formats and transcode formats, the more you can do to automate that stuff, the better it'll be. So it'll be scalable, you'll be able to handle more assets, it'll be quicker, and you'll be able to manage those assets without introducing big piles of mistakes that us poor humans inevitably insert. Then at the same time, it's always about money. So despite the huge increase in the amount of content that's being created and the huge demand for new high quality programming and content, that doesn't mean that there's been an increase in budgets available to make that content. And so everybody's looking for cost-effective ways to be able to manage those workflows. And what we see with both Spectra Logic and Squarebox with BlackPearl and CatDV is that our customers are choosing best-of-breed components. They can get really very cost-effective solutions by choosing the very best asset management tool, the very best storage tool, the very best archive tool that are cost effective and work across on-premise, cloud, or wherever. So those kind of things make modern production workflows, and we're pretty confident that that our tools really support those extremely well. So if those are the challenges, well, you only have to kind of take one layer off the onion, if you like, to see that underneath all of those aspects of a modern production workflow, things start to get complicated pretty quickly, particularly when it comes to storage. So creative teams need very fast access to very high quality content to be able to do their craft edits, to be able to color correct and such like. We need to be able to share that content both inside and outside the team, and maybe inside and outside the company. And so we start having multiple versions of the same content, lower quality proxy versions, as well as having the high-res master content. Security is absolutely paramount, whether that's web-based security when sharing proxy content, or whether that's securing content so that it can't possibly be lost inside a facility. And then we just see an increasing number of storage tiers that exist. So the online nearline for fast edit, disk-based archives maybe for content that's required quickly but not quite so quickly as the online content is needed. People do a lot of stuff with LTO tapes, maybe optical disks at the back end. The cloud is becoming an increasing archive solution, and then having remote sites and DR so that if the worst goes wrong, that solutions can just flip from one place to another, add another layer of complexity on top. And so I think what customers are looking for is an ability to handle these increasingly complex storage architectures without having increasingly complex tools to do it. And I guess that is what CatDV and BlackPearl do together. So we make it really simple to manage that extremely complicated storage landscape. So the kind of things that we can do, here's an example workflow. It doesn't have to happen in this order, that can go on between CatDV and BlackPearl, where we bring in content to a CatDV system. We might bring in some master content in camera original formats. We might make a proxy so that we can view that content offline, or we can share it outside the organization. We can log and tag it, so we enrich the technical metadata that's come in with that content, and then we can do something with it. So we can help the editorial process. We have great integrations with CatDV with a lot of the major nonlinear editing programs, whether that's from Apple, Avid, or Adobe, or others. Then that content needs to be safely stored. We've made some great new content. We need to be able to put it somewhere so that we know it's going to be secure, and if we ever need it back, or its component pieces back, we'll be able to get them. So that when we get to the final stage, reuse and repurpose, then we're starting to really save time, save money, save stress in that kind of content creation process. So that's the kind of workflow we can do with CatDV and BlackPearl. I think both tools are very flexible, so we don't have to do things in this order. We know many customers want to, as soon as they've seen content being ingested, for example, send that stuff to a BlackPearl so that it's immediately secured and it's safe, and nothing can go wrong during the creative process that will affect it. But this gives a bit of an example of the kind of workflows that we support routinely. So rather than spending a lot of time talking about what CatDV is and all that kind of stuff, I thought rather than just doing another death by PowerPoint that I sometimes do, we try and take a quick look and a quick whiz round some of the key components in the CatDV product family. So what do? I guess we do media asset management, production asset management. So we help people to make content better, faster, cheaper. We help people to reuse and find and reuse their stuff, manage their valuable content. We quite often as CatDV are called a window onto storage, so that increasingly complex storage landscape that we talked about earlier, being able for CatDV to provide a really simple view on it so that folks don't have to know which tier of storage content's on. CatDV and then BlackPearl alongside will just sort out where that content is and deliver it to the right person at the right time. And then finally, we're a great collaboration platform, so bringing things into a single system really allows folks to know exactly the status of a project or where content is, and so that really promotes a whole pile of collaboration between creative teams. So that's kind of what does CatDV do. Let's have a quick look at what it looks like. So we believe that there are many stakeholders in asset-based workflows, and so we have different user experiences for different people. Here's one of our simpler ones. I may have to log in again. Okay, so we can take a look at our content as film strips. We can have a variety of kind of poster frame views. We can have list views with all sorts of color coding in, which make it very easy to browse and navigate content. And then we've got the ability to do all sorts of searching. I've got quite a lot of offline clips in my database, so I've got quite a lot of content which doesn't have any associated images, but here's my shark content. I'll just head back over to something more pretty. And then once we've got this content, we can start logging and tagging it. So I've just clicked on that asset. I can start to mark it up. I can mark in points. I can mark out points. You can see I've got these colored markers which are appearing down at the bottom. And then I can do some asset-based logging based on these buttons, and we have a myriad of different data types to be able to make this stuff extremely easy to work with. So we can log with clips. We can do time-based logging. So this is our live logger, which essentially has a whole pile of buttons for adding markers and being able to add new verbatim logs, if you like. If you're doing a transcript of a show, then that kind of logging at the same time as the content is playing is another key feature that we have in our web client. And then we can do all sorts of things like really simple rough cuts. So if I've just select a few assets and create a new sequence, then I can just do really simple trim-based editing. I can mark an in, I just press the I key, there's an over and out. I can start to change the order of clips. I can add new clips from a search. So we can very quickly do very kind of YouTube style rough cut editing right inside our web client with web proxy clearly, which can then be sent out to the kind of craft edit tools, the Final Cuts, the Adobe Premieres, and the media composers of this world. So that's kind of a simple view of our CatDV web client. I mentioned we have several different ways of interacting with this content. We also have an advanced web client, and if I look at that same kind of catalog, then you can see that we have a richer user interface with more stuff appearing on the screen at the same time. So and many of our customers like this approach. It's much more similar to our installed desktop client, which we'll see in just a moment. One of the cool things about this, apart from seeing all of your media and all of your metadata on the screen all at the same time, is that we are able to handle rough cut sequences with a source and record approach rather than a simple YouTube style rough cut creator. So for those folks that are after a slightly more sophisticated experience for creating rough cuts, then this web client has the edge, if you like. So that's two of our web clients. We have another version of CatDV that is built inside as an extension to Adobe Premiere. So I'm just opening up a version of Adobe Premiere, and this is a pre-release. In fact, all of my software is pre-release version of the Premiere panel, so it needs a little tidying to make it look nice. But we're looking at a very similar view to the one we were just looking at on the web, where we can see content, we can do searches, we can see metadata and markers, got a frame accurate player in here, and then when we want to, we can bring in our sequences either with original media or proxy. So if I'd created that sequence on the web, I think it was one of these that we created, then clearly I was editing with proxy, then I can just import, and it'll by default import the master content, which I think is online. And let's get rid of our window, make it a bit smaller. But there's our kind of 4-clip sequence that we just created right inside Adobe Premiere, and based on the high resolution media rather than the proxy. So really neat workflows between, say, producers using the web and craft editors using the traditional NLE platforms. And then we have this. So this is our CatDV desktop user interface, and this is an install client, and it's got some unique features. Because it's an installed client, it lets us play media natively. So we handle a wide range of camera card content straight out of cameras. So P2, XD-Cam, RED, ARRI, a lot of DPX and EXR formats. And we can play back that content without having to transcode into a proxy format, which is fairly unique. There's virtually nobody else that can do that in the business. And so, we can look at simple previews of that content. So I'm happy to be looking at an H.264, but this could equally be a piece of RED or ARRI content that we can browse around. And then once we brought content in, we can start to enrich this user interface with other things. So we might want to add a player, we might want to add a metadata panel, and there's a huge variety of ways of being able to make this user experience look exactly as you want. And so, okay, this version now looks somewhat like the advanced web client that we just looked at. I guess other things that are worth noting, some of which are quite cool, quite new, is we have the ability to do some direct collaboration inside these kind of interfaces. So if I'm working on a documentary, for example, then a bit of a one-sided conversation, but we can have some chat about this project that we're working on. We can drag CatDV assets into the conversation. They're immediately updated, and so it's really able to provoke really collaborative conversations between folks in the creative process. So those are the kind of the main user experience pieces of CatDV. We then have our automation engine, and our automation engines, I guess, are perhaps not the most exciting things in the world, but we get quite excited about them, I guess. It's kind of what we do. And this is the latest incarnation of it. It's going through its final stages of testing at the moment, called Worker 7. And we get a set of tasks that are being worked on. If I was to start this up, then I think we can see some stuff starting to go through it. And so red tasks are those that have failed, green tasks are those that have succeeded. And then when the worker gets going, then it starts to process content. So there's some new content, purple things are happening at the moment, and the worker will just go ahead and process stuff. So I won't make it keep doing that stuff. But those of you that are maybe familiar with CatDV but haven't seen the worker for a while, it's certainly worth taking a look at the new Worker 7, because it has a really cool new graphical workflow builder. And so if I just enable this workflow, we can see exactly what this workflow is trying to do. It's watching upload folder, it's processing media, it's analyzing it, it's moving a file, it's moving an associated sidecar XML, setting a clip field, which will then kick off another automation and publishing to our server. So being able to build these workflows, being able to configure them with this palette of actions is very new for us, completely backwardly compatible with existing worker deployments, and really is part of a major piece of refurbishment we've been doing with the worker that follows on the desktop client and server that have had the treatment over the last few years. So that's the whistle-stop round CatDV. Let me see if we can take a look at another CatDV system. So you can see, hopefully, that I'm team viewered into one of our office systems, which has some content in it. And so what we're going to do now is take a look at our BlackPearl integration. So I'm looking at our desktop client. We can equally do this stuff in our web client as well. And so if I take a look at our job queue, for example, I can see there's nothing in our job queue at the moment that's pending, but if I look at some complete content, then I can see that earlier on today, in fact just before we started this this webinar, that there was a bulk copy of some content that went out to the BlackPearl, and we can see that what we copied was a couple of files. This is some red content, so it's the same content as we were looking at just on my machine, but this is all .r3d, and so there's Red Magazine and an R3D file here. And so what we do in really simple terms is we choose some content. So if I just, oops, just select a few assets, and then from our menu here, say I'm going to schedule a copy to BlackPearl. I get to choose the BlackPearl bucket, a bucket called CatDV, and then off it goes, and initiate a transfer of 5 files. So we can see there's some spanned content. I only selected 3 assets, but there's clearly some content that goes over more than just 3 files. So we handle camera card, complex camera card media, and can make and restore camera cards when doing the archive function. And then if we go and look at the queue now, have a look in pending. Okay, yes, this kind of content is then being archived to our BlackPearl that is running on this machine. So have I got the Xeon, the browser? What have we got here? Oh, bear with me. Here we go. So so this is the BlackPearl Eon browser. So what this is showing us is a tree-based view of the content that we are writing to our BlackPearl, and we can see we've got today's date. We've just done some archiving from our SBS NAS, and we've told CatDV to maintain the full file path, and we can see that these are the underlying assets that are being written out to the BlackPearl. So all fairly straightforward, but all of this kind of complexity and such like is completely hidden away. So heading back over to our CatDV system, we can see by looking in the menu, in our tools menu, then what we get is some options to be able to manage the BlackPearl and configure the access keys and the buckets and such like. We can copy, restore. Purge means delete in CatDV terms, so we can delete content, and it'll only get deleted when BlackPearl has told us that it's got the content successfully and that the BlackPearl database has been backed up itself, so that we can definitely do a restore in the future. And really it's as simple as that. So if I then head back over to this kind of window, and I'll refresh my my window here, then it's a bit laggy, I think, because of the internet connection with TeamViewer. Then off to the right of the screen, doesn't look like it's refreshing right now, but off to the right of the screen, then we can see there's a pile of metadata fields that show us the IP address of the BlackPearl that we're writing to, the bucket that things have gone to, and the status of the assets. So let's see now. Okay, so we've got an archive complete. We can see it's gone to the BlackPearl and it went today. I think the timing on this box, oh yes, this box thinks it's just 3 minutes past 6, which is why it's saying that the archive time is then 1802. So it really is as simple as that. So we could take that content offline now, and then we could do a restore, and it would all come back. And okay, thank you. Yeah. So I guess what I was saying was that what we have with the BlackPearl integration in CatDV is perhaps not the most exciting demo in the world, but the whole point is that we are hiding away a pile of complexity with both CatDV and BlackPearl that makes the user experience really, really simple. Folks can still use their Eon browser to be able to move content to the BlackPearl and back again, but why bother when you can use CatDV and you can preview your content and do it that way. So yeah, essentially, I guess I should also mention that the BlackPearl plugin has the ability to be automated. So what we've seen here is this content being archived by a person with these menu items. We can also use a worker task in our automation engine to be able to throw content to a BlackPearl based on some automation policy. So for example, any new content that relates to a particular project could automatically go to a BlackPearl using the worker, and then we can configure the URLs and the path in the object IDs in BlackPearl to do all that stuff too. So I guess that's it from my perspective. So let me hand over to Hussein, and he can talk about the BlackPearl end of things, which I've not been able to go into detail about. So okay, Hussein, here you go.
Thank you, Dave. That was a great job on your presentation. I thought it was great, how you talked about hiding the complexity. After all, the topic of this whole thing, what is it, how do you, in a modern way, manage the archive, all the tool sets with the explosion of all the assets that we all have. We sort of need to hide the complexities if we are to easily manage all the content. And when we look at the term modern, what we mean by it basically is the management of complexity and simplifying the whole environment. And when you talked about the tool set to manage, all the assets, and what we're going to talk about is the role that BlackPearl plays in simplifying and basically augmenting the simplicity that the overall solution brings together. In a very short way, I guess, what BlackPearl is an intelligent storage platform. It basically is object-based, and it is that simple fact that allows us to hide a lot of complexities associated with managing multiple tiers of storage, all through a single portal. And one of the most important things about this whole approach is that it changes the front-end API to a simple standard-based RESTful API. With RESTful APIs, basically what it does, it simplifies the communication model between the application and intelligent storage. It eliminates for the storage, even though it is multiple tiers, to talk directly with the application without the need of additional software layers to manage all that. It's a great thing, and it also hides complexities. What we do with BlackPearl also, we focus quite a bit on the standard-based set of tools or utilities that we use behind it. We also make sure that the backend is standard-based so that the files that are written to tape or the subsystems are readily available anytime in the future. In fact, for the tape, when we write the content to tape, if it is tape that is being used on the backend, then it is all LTFS, and that brings a whole slew of capabilities to the system, anywhere from content exchange between multiple sites or multiple partners that want to change content between them, or whether it is any time in the future, years in the future that you want to read your content. The system allows to have multiple tiers of storage, be it disk, be it tape, be it cloud, be it the remote site. It allows to do all that. And when you bring all of these through a single portal, then that eliminates the need to move the files between tiers of storage, which can create, considering the size of the files these days, it can create tremendous amount of traffic on the network. And we managing all the assets between these designated tiers of storage on the back end, we basically eliminate a lot of potential traffic on the network, and that makes a difference. Another important aspect of this model is that we can have intelligent policies to manage content depending on the workflow, depending on the performance need, depending on the retention need. All of that can be managed completely transparent to the end user. While the application is aware of it, while the sysadmin is aware of it, the end users basically work all directly through the application, CatDV portal, and they can search and they can find, and when they make a request, archive, it'll go based on a set policies to any number of storage tiers, or when they make a request, we bring the file back to the application, to the end user, from the fastest storage tier that is available, that we have the file available on it. So all of that stuff is completely transparent to the end user. Of course, these days, clouds are a very common part of discussions and consideration. Different organizations might be ready to take advantage of it or not. Others may have the need in the future. And one of the important aspects of BlackPearl is that it really does not care what the storage medium is. It can actually send the content not only to any storage tier as we talked about, but also to any type of cloud that the end user has a contract with. And at the time of recovery, should the request be made for a particular asset, if it has been purged or is no longer for any particular reason on local on-prem storage, then the BlackPearl will transparently go to the cloud, to assigned cloud, and it brings the content back seamlessly. So it does that. a very important aspect of this whole model, or in general, it should be for any archive or solution provider, is the aspect of future-proofing. If you make things, standard-based, and you make sure that the content are self-described on the storage mediums, then it is very, very easy in the future to be able to read those regardless of the application or a storage, in this case, us, and with standard tools that are available in those. So these are the important aspects that, when we were designing BlackPearl, we took a lot of consideration into. To understand basically the value of this, let me see if I can go to the next slide. Is the best way to see the value of this is to talk about the issues that are typical and associated with the traditional models. If you look at it, basically the traditional models, it usually require a layer of software to manage the storage. For tape library, it's different. For desktop systems, it might be different. For cloud, it might be different. But when you bring all of these together, it creates a lot of hardware and software issues and agent, and that creates complexities. With complexities, there's always cost. There's always issues to support. There's always issues caused as you scale it. And not only, costs associated with the scaling, but also the procurement part of it, it becomes very expensive. And as you guys all know, pretty much all of these traditional models are license-based, meaning that if you have need for additional, as is the case with everyone, as you scale basically your content, as you increase your content, and you have need for additional storage, that creates additional costs because it's license-based. If you need more performance, you need drives, or you need additional storage, or you need additional partitions, that all basically translate into additional costs. And that's a major issue with the traditional or current model. Of course, if you ever try to migrate your content from one medium to another medium, or from one application to another application that manages the content, that always brings additional costs and complexities associated with that whole migration tool. And that's a major issue that a lot of folks deal with. And we talk how basically we deal with that and soften the edge, or basically eliminate the pain associated with that. With complexity and having multiple tiers of storage, hardware and storage mediums and software layers, it becomes difficult to support it. When you try to find an issue, the more layers you have, the more difficult it becomes. So any simplicity that we can bring into the overall system basically eliminate that pain point. And of course, we talked about multi-vendor and standard-based. One of the major issues associated with current models is that pretty much all of them are based on a proprietary file system that they use on the back end. And if you try to share content between different sites, between clients, or for any basically purposes, or maybe distribution or DR and all that, it is very difficult because one application cannot read the content written by another application, and that's a major issue. That's another pain point that a lot of folks deal with. So what we've tried to do, again, we've tried to look at all of these and see how we can solve those issues. So what I would like to do on this slide, is to bring your attention to the simplicity of this model, this diagram on the right side. The way we see that with this model is that on top, you will see, layered the client application or user application, and it could be any number of tiers of them. And one of the benefits of this overall model is because it is based on it's a web-based architectural model, it is multi-tenant, so the content could be shared, between CatDV's different agents, or it could be used for other applications if they're there for whatever purposes. But we see in this model basically the application in this, CatDV, production storage, basically high performance storage is always needed for proper editing, rendering, or what have you. But when you look outside of that, the asset, how you retain it over time, where you put it, whether your policies, whether your workflows, based on the need and performance needs and all that, BlackPearl basically through a single portal can manage all of that. So whether it is in the news environment, you do basically need for decent performance nearline SaaS or storage to manage the most recent news worthy basically on a storage medium that is very readily available for access. But you don't want to basically overload your production storage. So you may have your production storage behind BlackPearl. You will put some amount of nearline SAS, and we manage that and we purge it based on policies defined. If the end user has a need to create copies for additional protection, as is mostly the case due to cost and air gap, then additional copies could be made on the tape, and it could basically multiple copies could be made, and one copy could go to an external location to provide additional protection. If it is, say, an environment like post or a sports environment that they need or ingest, where there's tremendous amount of content is being ingested, and it basically needs to go to a holding pattern in a repository that is very low cost until the post and editing process starts, or if it's, as is the case in case of sports, where you want to bring in a whole bunch of content, from, say, prior to seasons, 2 or 3 seasons, and have them for quick access, then we have SATA-based power down storage model that can also be managed. It could be any one of these, or it could be a combination of all this. And if the end user has the need to create copies in a DR in a remote site, that is a native function of BlackPearl, and the same thing as we talked about if they want to go to public cloud. But all of that, regardless of the workflow, regardless of the amount of resources, regardless of the amount of storage needed as you scale, there are no additional or increasing license costs associated with any of it, whether it is a drive, the storage slots, or the storage medium. And that's what makes this whole thing something that you can bring costs under control as you scale. And of course, the most important part of this whole thing is that the policies are set one time, and the application is aware of it, and it basically, depending on the type or the nature of the content, these assets could go to different buckets, buckets being a virtual entity, and those policies associated with that particular entity, with that particular bucket, it basically distributes and purges and manages the files across multiple medium, all again through a single portal. And that's what the beauty of this whole model is. There are other very important things, that are native to BlackPearl. We talk about, intelligent policy management, and we talked about storage, multiple tiers of storage that matches different workflows depending on performance and basically retention. But we can do also other things which makes it very easy. The fact that it is all abstracted at BlackPearl level, if you have migration need, let's say you want to go from one storage medium to another storage medium, from one LTO version to another storage, to another LTO version, or if you want to decide to go to the cloud, all of those, you can basically change the policy and things happen in the background very, very easy. That's all that it takes. It's basically native to it. Other things that we can do, which we had a hard time in the past to do, we've always been able to manage the integrity of the content, medium and the data, the asset themselves, but we were never able to take proactive action to basically reconstitute the asset. But in this particular, with the middleware model, with the traditional model, but with this model, because we have full abstraction control over the storage and where they are, if there are any questions associated with the integrity of any medium or a file or asset, we can reconstitute it from any of the other storage domains that we have under our control without the end user even being aware of it. And when the request is made, we will bring basically a short copy. Other things that we do, as Dave talked about, is the protection of the asset over time. Not only we can create multiple copies across multiple medium, but we also create copies, disaster copies of the databases associated with this whole solution. So let's say, God forbid, something happened, it is very easy to bring back and reconstitute the database, bring it back and bring the overall system back up. And then, a most important part of this whole thing is, as partners, we've put a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time into this whole thing to test and certify the solution under a lot of different conditions, and or under error conditions and different network conditions and all that. And of course, we have this thing installed in many sites. And the whole focus has been on simplicity. How do we hide complexity? Because ultimately, that is what makes things easier for the end user to put focus on what they do best, which is creating new content and monetizing it to basically support their business. As far as where this solution can fit, it pretty much can cover the gambit in any environment, from very small environment where we have installation to larger environment, multi-tenant environment, multi-site environment. This whole thing can basically adhere to the need of the customer. Dave, at this point, I was curious if you'd like to add any comments relative to the markets that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wanted to put some stuff in that talks about where CatDV and BlackPearl can be successful for organizations. And so we've put up these target markets where we have shared customers and we know that we have a fairly compelling answer. But at the same time, I think everybody has so much content, whether in every industry, and we're surrounded by media and video in particular in our daily lives. The digital signage that I walk past on the way into work is just growing and growing. So whilst we have these target markets, I think anybody that has to manage a large volume of content, whether it be audio, whether it be video, whether it be stills or a mixture, can make use of both CatDV and BlackPearl.
So I guess where do we take it here for for additional information? Here are the information about Dave and myself. Feel free to reach out if there's any questions, additional questions that you have. Feel free to now pose them. We look forward to your questions.
Perfect. And we have a couple questions that came in during the webinar. For the first, can CatDV determine which specific tape that BlackPearl has stored an asset on, whether the tape is in a library or on a physical shelf?
We store the object location in CatDV, and the API works based on that. So if the tape is not inserted in the library, we get back a useful message that says that is the case. So I'm not sure whether that answers the question or not. So we get a message to say whether the tape is in the library or not, but we don't store that in CatDV. We find out dynamically when we try and do a restore from the BlackPearl whether we have that content available at that address.
So I will add to that is that on BlackPearl's portal, basically we have a listing of all the objects that are on different tapes, and should a request be made to for a particular asset that say may not be on one of the storage tiers that we have under our control, then the end users and there is copies on tape, then the end user, that message is passed up, and the end user is asked to bring back that particular tape with that particular barcode so that the asset could be retrieved. So from the end user perspective, when needed, the barcode does get relayed to the end user.
Okay, perfect. And we have another question. How fast is the data throughput of BlackPearl?
So what we've done, being conscious of different size of environments and all that, there are different flavors of BlackPearl. At the very low end, it starts at 400 megabytes per second, sustained through any number by any number of streams that the end user demands, and it can also scale up to over 3 gigabytes per second. And of course, we really don't, there are two aspects of performance. One is really the sheer raw sustained throughput, but the other one is also simultaneous or concurrent access. So we can support, there are no limitations on the number of drives, or let's say big tape drives that you can have in a tape library. We can sustain that, but also quite often that is augmented by a certain amount of storage. Typically, if the end user has need for serious concurrent needs, in that case, then we can support a lot more concurrent access coming from disk or tape or simultaneously from both of them. So we've put quite a bit of thought into that to meet the need.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, so thinking about the end-to-end architecture, then CatDV's BlackPearl plugin is acting as a data mover. And so when we deploy by default out of the gate, then CatDV installs that automatically on the CatDV server. For customers who have particular high throughput needs, then we can deploy it on other equipment, and then it really comes down to the speed of the networking to that data mover device and its connection to the BlackPearl as well as to the storage.
All right, perfect. I have another question here. Is there a dedupe function on either CatDV or BlackPearl?
Yeah, so CatDV has the ability to find duplicates based on file size and file name as part of its disk analysis tool. Actually, can I make a request if whoever asked that question that we talk about that after the call, because CatDV grows based on feedback, and that's one of the items that we're currently prioritizing in the roadmap. So it would be useful to understand your specific workflow, and then maybe we can do something either as a pro services SKU or as an extension to CatDV that does that. So it's something that's pretty high up in our minds at the moment.
Okay. From the storage perspective, that is not something that we do, because anything that we do, we need to make sure that the application is fully aware of it. But I want to take that if maybe there are cases where files have been deleted on tape and we would have to reclaim this space on the tape, then that is another native function of BlackPearl that we can do recompact and recover and those available spaces from the files that were deleted. So that's a little bit of a different twist to it. It's not really dedupe, but I thought I'd bring that up since the opportunity presented itself.
All right. Any limitations on 5K video?
Could you repeat the question? Any limitations on
5K video?
I don't think so, but that might mean I don't understand the question. So, so we know that we can handle extremely large file sizes, and part of the BlackPearl API allows us to chunk up extremely large files as well as to bundle up a large number of small files, and media files are large. I mean, in terms of the largest file sizes that BlackPearl can handle, Hussein, do you happen to know that kind of data?
Yeah, we really do not have any limitation per se on it, but one of the aspects of the design is, by the fact that it is let's say RESTful and object storage, is that regardless of the size of the file and the bigger they get, we will chunk the files, and it allows us to checksum and hash key every block of these things so that we can move in the most efficient way and create parallelism. But it also gives us great opportunity, you know, should something happen on the network and we would have to retry or restart a transfer, we do not lose, you know, precious time on what has been transferred already. We can go ahead and start where we left off by the size of this chunk. So we've accommodated and considered pretty much transferring of very large files or small files. Now, there is one thing is if a file is, say, bigger than, you know, terabyte on, let's say, per table tape, then we would obviously have to break them down and put them on multiple tape. But those are the only really considerations. Otherwise, we don't really have put any limitations on it.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions coming in here. Is the Premier panel in CatDV available in Pro and Pegasus?
Yes, so the CatDV Premier panel is, you get a copy of that whenever you buy a CatDV desktop client, so the enterprise client and the CatDV Pegasus client. You get a copy of the Premier panel as part of that price, and the idea there is that on a particular edit station you can choose either to do your searches and your selects in CatDV and then push them from the installed application to Premier. We've got a send to option essentially, or you can choose to open CatDV and use it inside Premier. So essentially for that kind of edit based workflow, then whether people choose to use the Premier panel or the installed client, they only pay for the installed client. We do have some customers that want to use more Premier panels than they have installed clients. They just like it, and so it's on the price list as a line item on its own as well.
Okay, perfect. And another question, what is CatDV doing in the cloud?
Everything. No, that's a good question.
I like that.
So CatDV has always been a pretty technology or operating system agnostic product, and so our server runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux, and with Worker 7 that we just looked at, then that also runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. Our installed clients are Mac and Windows, and so what that means is if people are looking to virtualize, then a virtualize or cloud run or run in a data center or whatever, then CatDV is well suited for that. In fact, this seems to be the year of the cloud. We did some research last year, and we had 80% of our respondents tell us that they were going to be moving at least part of their workflow to a hybrid cloud model within 2 years. And now we're a year into that, and that seems to be playing out because many of the conversations that we have these days are about how does CatDV deploy in the cloud. And there are several models ranging from really simple, just keep your metadata in the cloud, to keep your metadata and search and proxies in the cloud, right through to putting your masters in the cloud so that you can get not only the benefits of kind of cost and simplicity of operation, but you can get some amazing collaboration going with your masters being stored in the cloud. So that's an into a very interesting conversation about people's specific workflows, because I think there's still quite a lot of folks that talk about moving to the cloud but don't quite know how. And I think we've got in our latest deck of different deployment models with CatDV in the cloud, I think we're up to about 15 common ones, and then so there's three main themes: metadata in the cloud, proxies in the cloud, masters in the cloud, and multi-site. And then each of those four kind of core options has a few nuances, and I think we're kind of 12-ish, 15-ish when we count them all up. So we'd love a conversation about specific cloud requirements, and we've yet to find one that we can't support.
Fantastic. All right, so there's quite a few questions remaining. I'll ask a few more before we hit the top of the hour. For those others that we do not answer, we will get back to you offline. So do either CatDV or BlackPearl monitor the health of archive files over time, such as through checksum monitoring?
I will take that. That is something that we certainly do. When part of the media lifecycle management that we have is that we can do two different ways of checking the integrity of the content. One of them is basically where we can take sample, where we load, and that is a native function, by the way, that could be set, and we will simply check the content integrity. Is we can sample test the storage domains that we have under us, and as I mentioned earlier, we can reconstitute if necessary. But we could, let's say in case of tape, if the end user requires it and they set it, then we can read the whole file and verify against the checksum available for those files. And we generate a report, and those reports, we call them a stoplight. And you will see those on our BlackPearl portal basically as color-coded, and you will know about the health of it. But as I mentioned again, seamlessly, we will reconstitute those files that may be in question. So the answer is yes, we do.
Yeah, and when we throw content into a BlackPearl, then the BlackPearl APIs do checksumming automatically on the way in. So we've got safety there. And then we recommend as good practice with CatDV that on ingest we calculate an MD5 and store that alongside the assets so that we can be sure that what we've got is what BlackPearl's got.
Very much so.
Is there any way to confirm on CatDV what is archived on tape?
That's a good question. So the archive, I'd have to check what are the various archive status messages. I think we just get a message back from BlackPearl to say that BlackPearl safely got the content, and then we let BlackPearl manage whether it's actually on tape or whether it's on the cache. I do know that before we purge, we check with BlackPearl that BlackPearl thinks it's safely got it, and that means two checks that BlackPearl does. Number one, is it actually on its final destination media, so a tape or a cloud archive somewhere, but also that the BlackPearl database has been backed up. And so that's usually a daily process. We came across this during our testing because we couldn't purge any files because the BlackPearl database, which is basically its own index of its tapes and files, hadn't been backed up itself, and so BlackPearl wasn't going to let us delete anything. So we do that.
Very much the case. If you don't mind, Dave, I'll add something to it. But when a job is when CatDV creates a job and it sends it to us, with the list of files that we are responsible to archive, the policy drives where we would, archive. If tape is part of it, or regardless of where it goes, the job status return, we do not return the job completion status to CatDV until the policy of retention is met, meaning that if the retention policy says copy on disk, copy on tape, and multiple copies, until we finish that whole task, we do not return a job completion to CatDV so that they can move on and purge the file. So yes, the answer is yes. Once we say that we're done, we guarantee that the files are at their final destination.
Okay. Another question, is there a workflow that the ingest to CatDV automatically writes to BlackPearl too, or simultaneously?
Yes. So yes, absolutely. So what we do is we'd have an ingest in CatDV that might be a watch folder or an upload workflow. CatDV would get that content, we'd analyze it, pull out thumbnails, pull out technical metadata, any EXIF data and such like, and then we can, what we typically do with CatDV workflows is we set a marker on that content to say, oh, this content needs a proxy to be made, and that will go off and we'll make a nice H.264 so that stuff can be shared. And we can set another marker that says this stuff's ready for logging, and we can set another marker that says please put this onto BlackPearl, and then other workflows can use those tags, if you like, to kick off those automations. So absolutely yes.
Wonderful. Okay, let's do one more in the interest of time. So how about deploying multiple BlackPearls in a non-homogeneous network environment, i.e. 16 or 40 gig Ethernet workflows, sharing an archive via CatDV or other MAMs?
So repeat the question. I want to make sure that I answer it accurately.
Sure. How about deploying multiple BlackPearls in non-homogeneous network environments, such as 16 or 40 gig Ethernet workflows, sharing an archive via CatDV or other MAMs?
So the question is, the application CatDV we can have, BlackPearl in an environment, and it'll negotiate down to the slowest that is available. I would imagine that would be a networking question, really. But CatDV, I don't know, Dave, if you've written it that way or not, but you could, or CatDV can manage multiple.
I'm going to interrupt. Using two different types of networks, fiber channel and Ethernet.
Okay, that's different. So the front end of BlackPearl is basically Ethernet. It is 10 gigabit Ethernet. You can have multiple ports where you can aggregate them, or you can have 40 gigabit Ethernet. On the back end of BlackPearl, we have fiber channel, we have SAS, or we can go to a network for the purpose of cloud, and we will support it depending on storage medium. So from the perspective of BlackPearl, we support it behind BlackPearl, so we can support all these different tiers of storage and their different interfaces. We hide all that. But from the purposes, from the perspective of CatDV, I would imagine that comes up where they have, production storage that is fiber channel. Dave, I'll let you answer to that part of it.
Yeah, so so from CatDV's perspective, networking is pretty transparent to us, and so if people have high throughput needs, then we'd suggest that the CatDV plugin, the data mover, has, say, fiber channel or fast Ethernet connection to the storage, and then we'll give that to the BlackPearl as quickly as we can over Ethernet, as Hussein mentioned. I mean, if folks want to have things going to different BlackPearls based on different policies, the way that we would do that today out of the gate is each CatDV server with each CatDV data mover would write to a different BlackPearl. So if you had, say you had a BlackPearl in in Asia and another one in North America, we'd have two CatDV servers, one for each, that could throw content onto each of them. But it is also worth saying that these plugins are not standing still. And so we had a customer on the East Coast just a few months ago that needed to be able to control the bucket that we were writing to, and being able to control the URL that was being written to, essentially, almost like the file path in more kind of traditional workflows. And so it wasn't any additional cost, but we decided that would be a good opportunity to upgrade the plugin so that with an automated workflow, you could choose the URL yourself based on CatDV metadata, and you could choose the BlackPearl bucket to throw content into. It wouldn't be a massive piece of work, I think, to be able to write to different BlackPearls. And when we store metadata to be able to recover content, that's stored on the asset. So when we looked at the BlackPearl screen in CatDV earlier, we could see the URL of the BlackPearl, and we know the credentials of that BlackPearl, so we can then go in and recover that content, even if it's gone to multiple different BlackPearls or multiple different buckets.
I wanted to, if you don't mind, Dave, I want to touch on another scenario that may exist and all that. I think that was part of the question as well too. If there are other applications, BlackPearl is a multi-tenant storage platform, meaning that if CatDV writes any amount of content to us, if BlackPearl is enabled and the credential is set for another application for any number of reasons, to have visibility into that, then we can notify the other application, so the other application can also basically add it to its metadata table, so they have visibility on it as well. It could be an environment. In fact, we are working jointly with CatDV. It could be an environment that may have multiple instances of CatDV, and the content written by one. It is possible. Although I know that CatDV can do that at their level, it is also possible that the content comes to us by one instance of CatDV. We could also make it available and visible to another instance. So that is possible due to the nature of this whole design, this whole model.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, it's not quite the question that was asked, but as well, we do get asked from time to time, if people have started archiving content to a BlackPearl, can we recover it and get that into CatDV somehow? And the answer is yes. Clearly, if there's content on an archive tape, we can't do an analysis of that content straight out of the gate, but we can get a listing from the BlackPearl database of what SpectraLogic knows about that asset. We can bring that into CatDV with enough data to be able to then recover it with using the CatDV automations rather than a manual front end. And then you can imagine setting up workflows where we maybe during the night we bring back a set of media, we analyze it, we make proxies out of it to some kind of CatDV cache, so that we can ingest content, we can analyze content in an automated fashion that's already on a BlackPearl. That's not quite the question that was asked, but I wonder whether it might have been heading in that kind of direction too.
Great
Okay.
comment.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you, everyone. For any outstanding questions, we'll respond to you offline. If you have any other questions, you can contact Dave Clack or Hossein Ziashakari. Again, we'll be sending out a recording after we conclude the webinar. Thank you for joining us today.